Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Non-Native Leader, a video podcast series where we explore stories of people who were not born in an English-speaking country, but today they're having an international career. Career in NGOs, career in fintech, IT, careers in commercial, different areas, different aspects, and they are now protagonists on the global stage. And if you follow the series, you've seen, people have shared their challenges, their rewards, their pains, their stories. Today I have with me Martin Utting. Sorry about the pronunciation, Martin. I always do that, but I always
You
try
did it
to
really
do
well.
I always try to do my best.
Congrats.
Thank you, Martin. And Martin is, well, as usual, I don't want to spoil it too much, but Martin has had an interesting career, is a career switcher like many of us, and many of us in the stories in the series. And I'm sure he's going to tell us all about it. And then he's just back from a great trip. Again, I don't want to spoil it, but he's going to tell us all about it and how that ties in with his international global career. So first of all, Martin, welcome. And thank you for being here with me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so tell us, Martin, where are you, first of all?
So I am based in Berlin, Germany, which is in my home country, my native country. I was born in Germany, but my work does relate very much to international, aspects, and has sort of a very international footprint, as it were. So I have actually lived most of my life in Germany. I thought when I went to university that I would absolutely and with certainty live abroad. But then somehow things happened differently, and I spent most of my time living in Germany. I also lived a bit in Italy. While I studied, I lived a bit in the UK and in France, and I went to school in the US for a year. So there is that international experience, but I am surprisingly for myself living in my native country
Great.
right now.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I love this because it seems to be the opposite of many stories we've heard, right? So some people say, "Oh, I will never leave my home country," and then they end up living in the other part of the world, the other side of Europe, And yours is a different journey, and yeah, it's an intriguing one. Um, but Martin, what do you do these days? What's your job? 'Cause-
I struggle sometimes to give it a label, but I think essentially I'm an artist and filmmaker working for system change. And I've been doing this since 2017, I would say. Before that, I was in advertising and marketing.
I see. Okay. So you're an artist, and okay, the first part of your journey, studies and working and living, and today back in your home country, but still with a global approach to being an artist. And if I'm not mistaken, you're recently more like into video making. So you're trying to communicate your art through videos. And so can you tell us just a little bit on how that relates to the international context? Because I think this is a very interesting point.
Yeah, so I would be more specific and say filmmaking. I think when you say film, it communicates automatically that there is a proper narrative approach to it. And that's important to me. I think we need to be telling stories. I have experimented in my past a lot with sort of music video and sort of mood films and stuff. And at some point you realize no one cares about those because they don't say anything. You have to be telling a story that people can relate to, where there's an emotional component and where there's sort of a progression of sorts. So I would call it filmmaking, and I have sort of big projects and small. And since 2017, my two big projects have been a documentary feature film, which we have completed basically only a few weeks ago. And the trip I was on was to go to the premiere of that film. And the other big project was a stage show slash performance slash presentation thing. We, throughout the entire time we kept doing this, we always had trouble labeling that as well. I feel
Of
like I
course.
have an issue with labels, like finding easy labels
That's
for what it is that I
okay.
do.
We don't like
Um,
labels anyway, so that's okay.
yeah, they're tough, aren't they? Sometimes you do
They
stuff that
are.
just doesn't label easily. I mean, the film is easy to label. It's a documentary feature film about two remarkable people, two people who work politically for a change in our economic systems. Everyone probably knows that the way we are running our economies these days is not working.
Yeah.
It's neither working for our societies. So many people are turning to, right-wing parties now. So many people are turning out of the democratic process altogether. And that's simply because I think the promises people were made are no longer being fulfilled. And that's largely due to the way our economies are being run. And if
Yeah.
we talk about nature and the environment, we know that our economies, and I'm not even talking about the climate crisis, I'm talking about everything else too, our economies are wrecking the planet. And these two
Yeah.
people I followed for a few years and who I've been making this film about, they are fighting the political fight to change our economies. And that's a big project. I spent quite a bit of money on it, and I spent an enormous amount of time on it. And we just presented the film for its premiere in Reykjavik
Wow.
in Iceland a couple of weeks
Amazing.
ago. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was quite the trip. Yeah, and then the climate and sort of transformation stage show that I worked on for 7 years. We put that on hold for a bit because everyone in that team is doing a few other things now. But we've basically developed this multimedia 1 hour long extended TED Talk format that we had with 4 people, and we traveled around Germany with that. So that was a very national project, and the film is a very international project.
Okay. Wow. So you're working on trying to cover the full spectrum there, which is great. So your home country and then change at a global level. I mean, that idea, that theme, the struggle is really dear to me. I mean, we've talked about this so many times. And the fact that you're trying to do something concrete to show what people are doing to change, to to try and go a different route, it's remarkable, right? And the fact that your documentary has just premiered, I think it's great because I do hope more people will actually see it and get to know the life and the struggles of more people like you, but like, again, politicians who are actually trying to, to do things and to change the way we're doing things. And now I can hear from, your passion, your description of the project is like, giving birth really to a creature, which is great. And you mentioned like it's been a long process, a long journey. So I suppose there must have been some challenges during the way. So I don't know, it's just my curiosity. If you could like in 1 or 2 sentences, so how would you summarize the challenges you've had in the production of the film, of the documentary?
I think the most important challenge was that I did not understand the mechanics of the film business before I started this. And the most important thing a filmmaker needs before they can start making a film is to have their partners lined up already with whom they're making and financing the film. When we started shooting this film, the story that we were focusing on was happening now. It was happening at that time, and getting your partners lined up and making sure that everyone is on board usually takes a year and a half or something. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, sometimes it's faster, but it takes quite some time. And I didn't have the luxury, as it were, to spend that time to find my partners. So we just started shooting the film. And I had some money on the side and I was able to pay for this. But the problem is that later on, then, when you have a film and you haven't built these partnerships at the start, there's no TV station, there's no streaming platform, there's no cinemas or whatever waiting for the film to come. Because none of these companies said, yes, we believe in the project, yes, we give you money, yes, we have our sort of investment riding on
Yeah.
this. But you're this lone guy who comes with a film that no one has asked for. And I
Right.
think that was the biggest mistake I made, and now I'm dealing with the consequences. And the consequences that this film, and I think that's actually fitting, will find its audience from the bottom up. You know, when
Nice.
you're a traditional filmmaker, the work is done when you hand the film off to a company that's then going to show it. You know, everyone dreams of having their film maybe on Netflix, and then Netflix has to promote it if they do, and then, you know, people see it. In my case, I'm transitioning now from being a filmmaker to being an advertiser and marketer again. So my old life
Yeah,
is catching up with me.
back to
Yeah,
square one.
exactly. And so now I need to find my audiences. And while we were making the film, I thought for the longest time that's completely impossible. I can't do marketing for the film because when you're making something, marketing that same thing at the same time is impossible because so much of
Yeah,
your mental energy is needed to find out what this thing even is. And then
absolutely.
marketing it at the same time is just, it's too many hats. But now that the film is done, I mean, we still have a bit of work to do, but essentially that the film is done, I find that I have more energy now again to do the marketing, and I'm actually enjoying
Yeah.
it. So in the past 2 weeks, I made a little 10-minute film of a behind the scenes story and the story of how I ended up going to the premiere in Iceland, in Reykjavik. And it was really enjoyable. It was a way for me to deal with these past 6.5 years. It was me summarizing the whole experience in a short film so that people understand what's behind this film.
Yeah.
And I look forward to sharing it, and I'm writing a newsletter, and I'm promoting it, and I'm sending stuff to people, I'm calling people, I'm talking to people who want to put on screenings and stuff. So suddenly now that the film is done, this idea of marketing the film comes almost naturally. And you know, and I'm hoping to make up for the mistake I made at the beginning by finding more people who want to show it. And who knows where the film might go in the end. You know,
Yeah.
when more people talk about it, maybe it catches the attention of someone who then does put it somewhere where more people even see it. You know.
Absolutely. That's the hope because I really think that the idea, the theme, the whatever is behind the film, it's crucial in our society, in our days. You know, we always talk about war, climate, and we always talk about global struggles. And yeah, I think your film, as they say, hits the nail on his head because
I, I hope,
that's
yeah.
the idea. Now, so Martin, this film has taken you to all the way to Italy, Germany, I believe Scotland, Iceland. So you've been traveling around to follow the people, to follow the struggles, and to follow the making of the film, which is talking about international approach. That's, what's more international than that? I'd like to, backtrack a little, if possible, so to go back to your early stages of your global career. You mentioned studying abroad. You mentioned living in different countries. So, how was it for you? So, how did you feel when you started?
Well, my first experience was going abroad for a year to the United States of America. I was 17 at the time. It was actually on my 17th birthday that I went. Um, and it was for a very stupid reason. You know, some people go to America because they want to learn about the world and they want to understand things and they want to maybe, you know, grow as a person. I had a very stupid reason. Earlier in school, a girl in my class went to America for a year with her parents. The parents went and she just went along because, you know, the father or whatever had the job opportunity there and she went along. She came back and there was something different about her. She seemed to be just, I don't know, more cool, a little more detached, just a little more. And I was a bit jealous. I was like, I wonder what she's gone through. I kind of want the same. And that was my starting point. So for a very
Okay.
stupid reason, I went to America.
I want
Um,
whatever she's having. Yeah.
yeah, I want whatever she's having, exactly. And then I had a proper culture shock. I went to a part of America that was very unlike the place I come from, very different. And so I really learned two things. I learned how to make English a proper functioning language for me. My English wasn't so bad when I went, but it was, you know, it really helped. But then also I properly understood what it means to be confronted with a very different culture, particularly when you're not expecting it. When you know, I grew up in what was then West Germany. The wall actually fell while I was in America.
Ah,
So
you
the
missed the
Berlin
big event.
Wall, I missed it. Yeah, the Berlin Wall
Oh.
fell when I was in America. So I went from the country that was called West Germany, and I came back to a country that only weeks later then reunited as Germany. So, but when I went, I left a country where America was always a signpost. America was our orientation. We felt we knew a lot about America from movies and TV shows. And then you go and you realize you don't know anything. You might have glimpses of LA and New York and maybe some of this and that, and maybe the Rocky Mountains and some nature film. But when you actually go to the countryside, you go to parts of America where cameras don't usually show up, you see stuff that other people don't really see when they're not going. So I really experienced culture shock. And I think those two things were really interesting. They showed me how much you need to adapt to a different place and to the ways of thinking there.
Yeah.
And they showed me how important language is, of course. And, I think many people nowadays think that, particularly young people, that with AI, language will soon no longer be a barrier.
Sure.
There's probably some truth in that, but I think the experience you have actually learning the language in a country and then being able to completely connect with culture there, that's unlike anything that you can have, even with translation help. So yeah, those are sort of some of those experiences, early experiences I had.
Couldn't agree more, obviously. Because learning a language, yeah, sure, we can translate, we can use technology, but being able to communicate your ideas, your thoughts, your point of view, it's actually a different story altogether.
And also, particularly also hearing others in another country speak about the logic of their lives in their language. Language reflects culture, and the way people make jokes, the way people address certain things, the way you can't help but become more knowledgeable about the culture itself and understand why certain things happen in a way. Sometimes, and I'm sure many people who listen to this and many people have had the experience, you realize that you look at a country from outside and what people are doing there, and you think that doesn't make any sense. That's crazy. And then you go, and then you learn the language, and then from within the culture, you realize it perfectly makes sense. I get why people are doing this.
Yeah.
And then you come back to your country and you try to explain to people why it is in a certain way, and you realize, actually, I'm missing the language. I would need that language to tell them. So I came back from America, and then a few years after that, George W. Bush was elected. And I remember how back in Germany, people were saying, how can they elect this idiot? And not elect him once, but twice. Now, we have Trump, which is a whole other level of idiocy. But back then, George W. Bush was amazingly silly as a president. And I had been there and I knew people, and I said, no, it makes perfect sense. I know people who would vote for him. I know from the context of their culture why they would. And you get other insight through that presence in the other country and through the language.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the language, the culture, the nuances, the shades. Yeah, it is not straightforward. You'd have to be there, regardless if it's in the country or talking to people, but you have to have that exchange, I believe. And I am 100% with you on that. That's what we do need. And it's funny you mentioned jokes, because the other day I was talking to a friend, and I asked him, so what was your the turning point for you in your international experience? And he said, the first time I was able to crack a joke in a different language. For me, that was the turning point, because it made me feel part of a culture, it made me feel part of a society, and I could say, finally, I'm there. So that was a nice story to hear. So on this note, Martin, I'd love to ask, what was the turning point for you in your international approach?
I don't know if there was a proper turning point when it comes to sort of my exposure to English and to English-speaking countries. I feel like when I went to America, when I was 17, I was still fairly young, and it was just sort of part of a big adventure. I think I did have a turning point when it comes to my exposure to France and the French language.
Sure.
My mother was a French and English teacher, and she always hoped that I would learn both languages. And for a long time, it looked like I would not learn French. It didn't quite work. I had a horrible teacher and only did it for 2 years in school. But then when I was going to university, I revisited this idea and ended up going to France. And I remember in France people thought at that business school that I went to, for the first few months, people thought I was shy. And nowadays, I wouldn't say, I don't think shy is an accurate description of me. I think I'm more of an introvert than extrovert, but I'm not shy. But they thought this because I simply wouldn't speak, and I wouldn't speak because my French was so bad. In a group of 4 or 5 people speaking French with each other, there was no way. And it took me, there were 2 experiences that really changed this. One was in the winter of that year, of that university year, I went on a skiing trip with a bunch of my mates from the business school. And I spent the week in a room with 2 French people. And I hated it. Because from morning till night, I would hear French and it would be tiring and I was sick of it and I couldn't hear it anymore. And, the first thing you wake up is them 2 speaking French to each other and to you, and it's just so tiring. And the last thing you hear at night is French. And I was like, oh man, I'm sick of this. And when we came back, I realized my French had made a shift. In that week, had made a jump. And then again, a few months later in the spring, we went on a boat trip on a large ship, sailing ship with, I think, 50 of us. It was a big ship.
Wow.
And again, I was in a room with 4 other French people in one of these little cabins with our bunks. And again, I was like, oh my God, French all the time. I'm sick of it. And after that week, we got back. And after that week, I was fluent. I was just fluent. So it took those 2 really intense, until it comes out of your ears, exposure to the language to really get to that level. And I think that for me, realizing how you can step change your ability in the language with that level of, hardcore exposure.
Yeah, that's what you call immersion. So immerse yourself and
fully.
You even went on a boat to immerse yourself. So.
Of sorts, yeah.
Yeah, no, that is great. That's great advice. So this constant repetition, this constant, exposure to the language does the trick. And this is remarkable again, because again, it's not something that you can, it's hard to do it on your own, I suppose. Being in a context like that does help. And after a week, you had this feeling you were fluent. So it's all about, confidence. It's all about being comfortable now with the language, with the situation, which is something that you can't achieve in a standard way, I'd say. So
and I think the important thing is, and I think this is what many people get wrong, is you get too comfortable through uncomfortable. And people like to say that children learn languages so fast because their brain is somehow more malleable and they are more flexible and they can learn it playfully and so forth. And adults, they have more structure in their brain, and for some reason, that's all bullshit. There is a single reason why adults find it much harder to learn languages than kids do. And that no one talks about this reason. Yeah. And that reason explains it, in my opinion, explains 95% of it. And that one reason is pride. A child, is completely used to the idea that most of the stuff going on around them, they don't understand. Children usually, when you were a kid, you were 3, 4, or 5 years old. Most of the stuff the adults do, you don't understand.
Of course.
Right? They talk about stuff, they do things, none of it makes sense, and you're just part of the landscape. So when they go to a different culture and country, the fact that whatever is happening around them, they don't understand a word. What's the news? To them, it's just normal. So they just keep on doing what they do.
Yeah.
Adults, when you're an adult, from a certain age onwards, you assume, I get this world. I understand what's going on. I can move through this world and understand. So when you get thrown into a different culture, and all of a sudden, nothing makes sense. People say this. They say, oh my God, I feel so stupid.
Yeah.
They say this. They don't speak the language.
I've heard it a lot. Yeah, I've heard it many times.
And they say, I feel stupid. And that's where they take the wrong turn. Feeling stupid goes against your pride, and they go, well, let me hang out with the other expats. Let me hang out with those people who speak English, or maybe find people of my own language and hang out with them. And I'm going to learn the language by going to language classes. And that won't work. You have to feel stupid for 6 months until suddenly it's comfortable. That, and I think this notion of pride and the role that pride plays in not wanting to learn the language because it's so horrible to feel stupid as an adult.
Of course.
That no one talks about this. And I think it's the most important thing when you want to learn language. Check your pride at the door, hang it on the wardrobe, forget your pride, and be absolutely ignorant, wide-eyed, thinking, oh my God, it's remarkable how little I understand.
Yeah.
And then you learn the language.
And that's great advice, Martin. So less
I've been
pride,
thinking a lot about this.
less pride, more stupidity. And
there you go.
But, can we call it wise stupidity?
I mean, stupidity is misleading because I think it's actually, it's the wisdom of accepting your ignorance. I think that's what you need. And once you feel, I remember a dinner in Italy and people were talking and I was like, oh, I can follow this thread of a conversation. Oh God, this is making sense. And then and suddenly they take a right turn and I'm like, where did they go? Why did they leave me? Why don't I understand? Afterwards, I figured out why. Someone had mentioned Tremonti.
Okay.
To me, Tremonti, that's 3 mountains, isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah,
that's
but Tremonti was the last name in that context. So I think we're talking about 3 mountains. They talk about a person.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, what they're saying makes no sense at all. So a single word throws you off. And now the next time someone asks you, do you want to come to dinner again with all of us? You might think of Tremonti and you might say, oh God, no, I won't understand a word. It's horrible. No, let's speak English. Or no, you have to go again and again and again. And it has to hurt and hurt and hurt. And finally, after 6 months of hurt, suddenly you'll be fluent and you didn't even notice it.
Yeah. So I am 100% with you again, Marty. So put yourself out there, make mistakes. Don't be afraid. It's been great, Martin. I love your approach. So hanging it out there and put yourself out there, speak, listen. Yeah, get into the situation, get into action. There's no other way. So absolutely. Martin, look, it's been great. It's been great having you. It's been great chatting to you. And I am going to hang this on my wall. So no more pride if you want to learn. This is one great takeaway from me. So thank you again for being here with me. It's been great. And thanks everybody for sticking around, for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, Martin. Take care.